Okay, welcome to my lecture on the chess tactic of deflection. So, in this position, let's say it's white's turn to move, and white can use the chess tactic of deflection. And the move is, actually, the white bishop moves to g8. So what's happening is that the king is sort of left with not a very good option. If it captures the bishop, then we simply capture the queen. Okay. And if, let's say, the white king just moves forward one, now the queen is actually, we're going to win the queen by force, because it has two attackers and only one defender, the king. So, in the deflection, a true deflection is where, and this is a deflection, is that we're going to check. The enemy king is actually going to be deflected away, meaning he's being drawn away from the defense, and we're going to be able to win a piece. So, let's just cover the definition that I have for deflection. Deflection is a forcing move designed to draw or deflect the defender away from defending a piece or an important square. So in our case, the king was deflected away from the defense of the queen, and white was able to win the queen. So let's try to cover several more examples of deflection. Okay, I've set up this position, and it's black's turn to move, and actually black can employ the tactical concept of deflection to win the white queen. Well, how are we going to do this? Well, if you think about it, the only defender, this isn't really removing, remember in removal of the guard we'd take out this rook, but in deflection we're going to, and it's not an overworked piece, or this rook is not an overworked piece because it is doing two defensive jobs, but what we're going to do is we're going to sort of deflect or draw away this rook here from the queen. How are we going to do that? Well, we're going to check the king. Now this may seem a little silly if you think about it. I mean, maybe on the onset you would say, I wouldn't think about this move because, you know, that square, if you think about it, this square here was defended 3 times. Once by the king, once by this rook, and then once even by this rook. So, and it was only attacked twice originally. If I back up a move from this rook, oops, then draw the line from this rook and from this rook back here. So you're saying, well, you know, I can't checkmate the king, but actually what I'm doing is I'm deflecting this rook, because now I've delivered check. I mean, remember I said there's only 3 things you can do when you check. You can run, and the king can't run because it can't move to any one of these squares because there's pawns here. Can't move here, would be captured by the rook, and it can't move here because it could be captured by either rook. And it can't block because there's no square between the king and the rook, so it must capture. And unfortunately, the piece that is going to capture was the one that was defending the queen. So, white is forced to capture this rook. And now the queen is left. This queen is left undefended. Now, before you go and just capture, well, black could just capture this queen. Okay? But in this position, it's always good because things could get complicated if we take the queen right away. Maybe white could take a check or whatever. It's always good to sort of clear off these pieces to make your advantage even greater. And I'm going to cover this. This is actually sort of what they call simplification in chess. Okay, so the actual correct move to play before you recapture the queen would be to take, once again, this rook. And now either the king or the rook could recapture. Obviously, once again, we can't block or run with the king, but we can capture with the king or with the rook. Let's just say the rook decided to take. Doesn't matter, either piece could take. Now we capture the queen. Now black has a clear winning game. Let's cover one more example. Okay, the last position I want to talk about is this position, white to move. Here, let me turn off the chess engine. Sorry for that. Actually, it took me a while to compose this position. Kept having difficulties. And basically, white's turn to move, and probably most people would play. See, the problem, if you don't know, in this position for black is this square right here is sort of very weak. Actually, anything along this entire right here's, if the queen can somehow get over to here, it'd be a problem. So, I mean, I would, just looking at the position, if you didn't know, I would probably look at something like this, and then with maybe checkmating here. And that's a very good plan for white. So technically, white could move something like this, and then black would probably have to respond this way, and then the game would probably continue with white taking en passant like this, and this would eventually lead to a win for white. But actually, in the original position, white can employ the tactic of deflection. If you think about it, the only thing stopping white from checkmating almost in one move is that the queen could actually come and take this piece and then deliver checkmate, because white's rook attacks these squares. The queen, if it could take this pawn, could attack these squares, and the black king would have nowhere to run, no chance to block. The game would be over. And the only thing defending this square right here is the queen. So in effect, this is the only defender to this. And we can't, removing the guard was we just capture the queen, but we can't do that. So what we want to do is deflect the queen. We're going to try to draw the queen away from the defense of this pawn. And how we do that is we play the white rook here. Now black has a huge dilemma. There's no way for black to defend this square and retain its queen. The queen is now under attack, and the queen can't move. If it moves anywhere along this entire line, any one of these squares, or maybe I should just highlight them. If it moves any one of these squares, it's just going to be captured by the rook. And it really can't move to these two squares because they're being controlled by the two pawns. So black is at a huge dilemma of being checkmated or losing the queen. If it loses the queen, that's a huge loss, and it's just going to end up losing the game. So probably actually if it moves the queen, it's checkmate. So more than likely what black would do would be to play something like this, and then white would just capture the queen, because if it moves the queen, it loses the game instantly. And I fed this into my chess computer, and I actually said, remember, this was the original starting. This was the original starting position. Moving the queen, my chess computer actually said, led to a checkmate in 14. Okay, so it can analyze this at checkmate in 14. By moving the rook down, the chess computer says checkmate in 7. And it basically black has to give up its queen. And black still gets checkmated, but the checkmate is in 7. So we can see how the chess tactic of deflection while it does not win the game outright, it led to loss of material for black and actually a quicker